pair of lawsuits filed this week against Harvard University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill are just the first of many, or so says the group behind the action. The Project on Fair Representation claims both schools use race-based affirmative action policies that disadvantage Asian American students and accuses Harvard of capping the number of Asian American students it admits. Harvard and UNC insist their admission policies are above board, but the lawsuit against Harvard claims the school's remarkably stable admissions and enrollment figures over time are the deliberate result of system-wide intentional racial discrimination designed to achieve a predetermined racial balance of its student body. This lawsuit comes at a tense time for thousands of families around the nation who are knee-deep in the college application process, and it raises some serious concerns. Joining me now is Daniel Golden, the author of the book The Price of Admission, a scathing look at admissions preferences in the American university system. Welcome, Dan.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So, this is not a new concept at all. We've been talking about race and other preferences in colleges for 100 years. Harvard, in the 1920s, instituting the character rule to limit the number of Jews who were admitted, for instance. So what's new here? And help us put it in context.
Well, you're right. This is a long-running issue, even as regards the treatment of Asian Americans in college admissions, which is what this lawsuit is about. What's new here is that the issues regarding Asian Americans have primarily been dealt with by the federal government in various complaints and investigations. This is a relative rarity, a lawsuit about alleging that Asian Americans are discriminated against and that affirmative action discriminates against them. Normally, the lawsuits allege that whites are injured by affirmative action policies.
One of the allegations is that Asian Americans, there's a quota, a specific number. In your reporting, have you found any evidence of that?
Well, there's not a smoking gun, but the numbers are, intriguing. In my reporting and what other people have shown, there tends to be, particularly in the Ivy League, for example, 15 to 20% of the student body tends to be Asian American. Never seems to quite exceed 20% at Harvard, for example. It's usually somewhere between 16 and 19%. So people ask, well, how do they achieve this consistency of numbers over time? And, just for people who aren't familiar with this, Asian Americans don't benefit from affirmative action because they're overrepresented compared to their numbers in the population. But the argument is they're underrepresented at these schools compared to their educational attainments. So that the studies show you need a higher SAT score, for example, if you're Asian American to have the same chance as a white. You need, just generally better academic credentials.
Now, is there some hypocrisy among the universities? The universities talk about we're trying to create a balanced, a vibrant community of people from all diverse, different ideas and ways of thinking and backgrounds. And yet you prove in your book, I think very clearly, that at bottom it's a money question.
A lot of it is a money question. They give preference to alumni children who also make up, at a lot of elite schools, 10 to 20% of the population.
That's an affirmative action.
Right, it's an affirmative action for the wealthy. There are kids of just known as development admits who the parents are not alumni, they're just rich and expected to donate. So that's a wealth factor. Admission's a very complicated game, and academic merit is just one part of it. And diversity is a very spongy, flexible term. I mean, one man's diversity is another man's discrimination. And you'll notice that often these types of diversity are in conflict. If you want more economic diversity, you may not be able to have as much of another kind of diversity. So they can almost use diversity to justify anything they do.
And didn't we solve this problem, or at least the Supreme Court spoke about this problem, gave us some guidelines in the Bakke decision, is going back as far as 1978. Aren't those guidelines simply a roadmap for the universities to follow?
Well, the guidelines themselves are not all that clear and simple. I mean, essentially the court has held that you can't have a quota. You can't just use race to determine admissions, and you can't have a quota for a race. But it can be one of many factors as long as you've achieved you've ruled out all race-neutral approaches that can't give you the same diversity. So this leaves a lot of room. It's not the clearest, simplest roadmap, and there's a lot of debate over, have these colleges really looked at all the race-neutral alternatives? You know, what does it mean to consider race but just one of many factors? So there's a lot of, you know, ambiguous language.
If this lawsuit were successful, would the student body at a Harvard or a UNC or other places, would it look vastly different?
Well, presumably you would have an increase in the number of Asian Americans. And then the question becomes which group loses out as a result. Now, this lawsuit is arguing that they should eliminate preferences for alumni children, and essentially some of the wealth preferences to have more low-income students and more Asian Americans. Whether that would happen and who exactly would be the losers is, yet to be determined.
Is the answer, or as some people suggest, going to a system like the UK where Cambridge and Oxford describe no social, racial, religious, or financial concerns factor into their decisions, which are based purely on academic merit?
Well, I mean, I don't really have a strong answer to advocate. My view is there should not be wealth preferences, like for development admits and for legacies. I do believe in need preferences for people who have come from very difficult economic or social circumstances. I think if they show potential, they deserve a leg up. I mean, the research does show that SAT scores, low-income people tend to do poorly. And I think that one of the missions of these schools is to help Americans achieve the American dream, help raise people from the lowest strata of society. And so I think that people at the bottom deserve a boost. And I would tend to say at the bottom in terms of assets or income rather than racial affirmative action. But I think it is a more complicated question, always will be, than just grades and test scores.
Daniel Golden, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much.